Get her out of here, security! Throw this woman out of the showroom! Derek, the floor manager, snarled, his cold command tearing through the luxury atmosphere of the city's finest car dealership. Every customer and employee spun around in shock at the sight of a casually dressed black woman in her 40s, slowly pulling her phone from her purse. A security guard stepped forward, hand on his radio, ready to do his job. "I just want to look at a car as a gift for my daughter," Marka replied evenly, her voice calm but firm. "I haven't raised my voice, caused a disturbance, or shown any hostility." Derek cut her off, a sneer twisting his lips. "We don't sell cars to people like you. You're wasting everyone's time. This isn't some back alley lot." His words echoed through the showroom, drowning out the hushed giggles and scornful glances from the well-dressed staff and upscale clientele, all of whom looked at Marcia with either smug amusement or cold disdain. In an instant, the guard escorted Marcia out of the dealership. But before she reached the door, something happened. Something that would change the entire world within those glass walls forever. This is a vivid testament to karma, a powerful lesson for anyone who dares to expel the true owner from the kingdom they arrogantly believe they rule. Morning sunlight spilled golden ribbons across bustling Rodeo Drive, where luxury brands lined the street and polished sports cars cruised by every day. Amid the chic crowd, a faded silver Honda Civic, streaked with dust, quietly rolled into the lot of Premier Auto Gallery, the most renowned luxury car dealership in Los Angeles. The door clicked open. A black woman in her 40s stepped out, her soft curls tied back, her kind face lit with determined eyes. She wore simple jeans, a worn navy polo, and scuffed white sneakers yellowed by time. Her unassuming appearance stood in stark contrast to the showroom's sleek, meticulously groomed clientele. None of the receptionists at the glass front desk, nor the champagne-sipping patrons inside, recognized her as Marcia Williams, the CEO and largest shareholder of this very luxury dealership chain. Today, Marcia wasn't here for meetings, contracts, or sales figures. Today, she was simply a mother with pride and love overflowing, wanting to personally choose a gift worthy of her daughter, Jasmine, who had just earned her MBA from Harvard. She had prepared for this moment for months, carefully researching the latest models and every color Jasmine adored. But instead of appearing as a powerful executive, she chose to present herself as any other customer, eager to gauge the experience that parents without fame or fortune would receive in the place she had built from the ground up. She closed the car door, adjusted the strap of her canvas tote, and took a deep breath. The morning sun warmed her shoulders, and a gentle joy shone in her eyes. Little did she know, within a few hours, her life and the fate of Premier Auto Gallery would take a turn she could never have imagined. In that moment, all Marcia thought about was the radiant look on her daughter's face when she received the most special graduation gift she'd ever been given. The automatic glass door slid apart quietly, ushering Marcia into a world that contrasted sharply with her unassuming appearance. The scent of brand-new leather mingled with soft jazz, drifting through the air, and light danced off the glossy paint of BMWs, Mercedes, and Porsches, lining the showroom like trophies on a stage for the elite. Polished white marble underfoot gleamed beneath warm golden lighting, creating an atmosphere at once refined and distant. Italian leather chairs, spotless glass coffee tables, and flutes of champagne in the hands of impeccably dressed patrons all spoke of privilege and prestige. Marcia offered a small, composed smile as she walked among the luxury vehicles. Almost immediately, however, she felt curious, scrutinizing gazes probing her from every angle. A middle-aged white woman chatting with her husband paused mid-conversation, glanced down at Marcia's simple outfit, frowned, and whispered something that prompted her husband to turn and look, too. At the consultation counter, two sharply dressed salesmen in button-down shirts and dark ties broke off their discussion, exchanged puzzled glances, and resumed shuffling brochures as if Marcia's presence were an inconvenience. She slowed her pace. While other customers were greeted enthusiastically, escorted to admire each car, Marcia received only polite nods. No one stepped forward to assist. A young salesman named Jake stole a look at her scuffed sneakers before quickly turning away to straighten the display catalog, as though her very being unsettled him. Across the glass wall on the right, she caught sight of Tony Martinez, a tall guard passing silently by with his eyes fixed wearily on her. In one corner of the room, a cluster of female staff whispered among themselves, their eyes darting toward Marcia before breaking into half-smiles of uncertainty. One leaned into her colleague and murmured, "Why is she even here? She looks like a public school teacher." The showroom's air grew heavy with those covert stares and half-smiles. Marcia knew that feeling well. It wasn't welcome, nor was it benign curiosity. It was prejudice wrapped in the guise of civility and propriety, and acted in the very place she had built from scratch. The deeper she ventured, the more palpable the invisible boundary around her became. Greetings grew perfunctory, and some employees even sidestepped her to avoid accidental conversation. At the far end of the showroom, Derek Morrison, the floor manager with gelled blonde hair and a tailored suit, was animatedly talking with a familiar couple. His eyes flicked to Marcia for just a moment, his lips curling into a knowing smirk before he turned back as if nothing were amiss. In that brief instant, a chill ran down Marcia's spine. Despite being the founder and majority owner of this entire dealership network, she was treated like an outsider, simply because of her plain clothes and her skin color. Even Derek, once praised, in employee newsletters regarded her with guarded scrutiny, not doubt of her expertise, but suspicion, as though he awaited any excuse to prove she didn't belong here. Beneath the soft jazz, tension and coldness now filled the space. Marcia silently steeled herself to remain confident, but her heart still tightened with every step toward the BMW M8 her daughter longed for. She felt as though she were treading on a thick carpet of bias, ready to swallow anyone, daring to stand out in this world of fabricated perfection. Little did she know that her humble presence and the attitudes of those around her would ignite a seismic event destined to shake Premier Auto Gallery to its core that very day. Though the air grew colder with each judging glance, Marcia kept her steps measured, her fingers tightening around the strap of her tote. Deep inside, she reminded herself, "Today, I'm just a mother, not a CEO, just Jasmine's mom." That thought guided her straight to the center of the showroom, where a midnight blue BMW M8 competition gleamed under the crystal chandelier. She paused, her eyes softening as they met the car's sleek body. The deep sheen of the paint caught the light, and the car's smooth, powerful curves reminded her of her daughter's own strength and determination. She thought of the countless nights she'd sat by her window, imagining the day Jasmine would graduate from Harvard, and how she, Marcia, would give her first real gift after years of battling prejudice, expectations, and limits. That quiet pride, even in its gentleness, surpassed every deal and every seven-figure sale she'd ever made. Gently, she laid a hand on the hood, feeling the cool metal beneath her fingertips. Memories from her own youth flooded back. The days she rode an old-school bus, dreaming that someday she and her daughter might cruise down a boulevard lit like this one. That simple dream had carried her all these years. And now she wanted to pass it on to Jasmine as a symbol of overcoming, of believing you deserve the very best as long as you have the courage, hard work, and perseverance. Around her, hushed conversations, clinking champagne glasses, and the faint laughter of a few employees couldn't dim the hopeful light in Marcia's eyes. She pictured Jasmine's smile, tears welling up when she'd see the car, imagining her daughter grabbing her hand and exclaiming, "Mom, we did it!" Nothing could match the fulfillment of that moment. But as Marcia stood lost in her dream, a tall, stiff figure approached from behind. It was Derek Morrison, gray suit, deep red tie, his face betraying clear irritation. He glanced at the BMW M8, then at Marcia, his brow lifting in a thin-lipped smirk that mixed contempt, suspicion, and something like wounded pride, as though her very presence here insulted the luxury he'd sworn to protect. In that instant, the divide between insider and outsider felt sharper than ever. Yet Marcia did not back down. She summoned all the warmth and tenderness of a mother, kept her hand lightly on the car, and held her gaze forward toward the future she dreamed for her daughter. She didn't yet know that behind her the ripples of prejudice were gathering into a storm that would test her strength, dignity, and her faith in the true worth of a person. But amid Marcia's daydreams and tender recollections, the harsh reality crept in like a freezing gust. The echo of polished dress shoes on the marble floor grew louder behind her, then stopped right beside her. A cool, clipped voice cut through her thoughts. "Excuse me, ma'am. Do you need something here?" Marcia turned to face Derek Morrison, the floor manager and one of the most powerful figures at Premier Auto Gallery. His expression was icy, with no hint of welcome. His gaze flicked quickly from her faded jeans down to her worn sneakers, then landed on her canvas tote. He exuded the arrogant confidence of someone who believed himself the gatekeeper of this place's luxury and exclusivity. Marcia forced a polite smile and kept her tone even. "I just wanted to look at this BMW. I'm thinking of it as a graduation gift for my daughter." Derek snorted and shook his head, half pitying, half mocking. He deliberately raised his voice so everyone could hear. "Do you know how much this car costs? $145,000? Not exactly within everyone's budget. Perhaps you'd be better off at the Honda dealership down the street." His words, sharp and stinging, sounded like a slap in the middle of the opulent showroom. Instantly, bystanders turned to watch. A few employees exchanged gleeful looks, some stifled laughs. Others crouched to check their phones. A well-dressed older couple nearby whispered to each other, "Completely unreasonable, coming in here only to bother people." Marcia could feel wave after wave of prejudice rising around her. But Derek wasn't finished. He stepped forward, his tone growing harsher, his eyes brimming with contempt. "Look, this isn't a used car lot. We serve only those with the means and the intention to buy. We have clients waiting for real consultations. Can't waste time on stunts like this." The whispering and sneers from staff and customers swelled. Some looked on as if they were witnessing an impromptu show. From across the room, Veteran salesman Brad Chin shrugged to a colleague, his eyes openly mocking. Every word Derek spoke was more than a doubt about her finances. It was an unspoken indictment of her social standing, her right to dream, the invisible line separating who belongs from who should only look in. And the cruelest part? These words were spoken in the very space Marcia had helped build. Surrounded by disdainful looks and cutting remarks, Marcia stood tall, her gaze fixed ahead, fingers gripping her tote strap, holding on to the last shred of dignity amid the storm of bigotry. In her eyes, the gentle pride of a mother had hardened into the resolve of a warrior, one who knew that sometimes a single prejudiced comment could shatter someone's dreams. In that moment, Marcia realized her real trial was only just beginning, not merely buying a car for her daughter, but fighting to preserve her dignity, her honor, and her right to be treated fairly in the place she once called home. The showroom still gleamed under its crystal chandeliers, but around Marcia the air had grown thick with hushed whispers, cold stares, and quiet snickers. After Derek's opening blow, the mood didn't soften. It only grew more uncomfortable, as though Marcia were the unwilling star of a private performance, an outsider among those who fancied themselves the hosts. At first, the laughter was subdued, just a few scoffs from a group of young staff at the information desk, but it quickly spread throughout the space. Employees who'd been eyeing Marcia discreetly since she arrived now pointed and whispered without shame. One blonde associate named Linda even looked Marcia up and down, taking in her curly hair, simple outfit, and scuffed shoes before glancing at Derek as if awaiting the next punchline. Almost simultaneously, a middle-aged man in a navy suit, his face the picture of corporate success, pulled his wife closer and muttered, "Another dreamer. Don't they understand this place isn't for just anyone?" His wife leaned in so Marcia could hear. "I told you reception should have screened people. Letting anyone in ruins the vibe." In another corner, Brad Chin, the dealership's top salesperson in a tailored Hugo Boss suit, set down his champagne flute and strolled over to Derek. Brad wasn't one to draw attention, but his words carried weight. He shot Marcia a mocking grin, raised his glass toward Derek and the onlookers, and said with a smirk, "Hey, Derek, maybe we should put up a sign for a clientele only. Might save us all some trouble." Laughter erupted among the younger staff. Someone even pretended to clear the path in front of Marcia as if to block unworthy guests, while another furtively recorded the scene on her phone, giddy at the prospect of midday entertainment. Soon, other customers took notice. A white older couple showed their displeasure openly. The man folded his arms, smirking at Marcia like she was a lost child. His wife shook her head in disappointed exasperation. Across the room, a group of young men fascinated by the cars began to murmur, one of them scoffing, "Why would people like her even dare to come in here? Think they can actually afford luxury cars?" Marcia stood at the center of this invisible cage. Each glance, each sneer, each cutting whisper felt like a physical pressure. But she didn't flinch, bow, her head, or erupt in anger, as many expected. Instead, she held herself tall, her voice calm and unwavering, like a still lake. "I'm just here to look at a car for my daughter. This is a luxury showroom, right? I assumed every customer deserves proper consultation." She met Derek and Brad's eyes, without fear or hesitation, as if an unspoken strength radiated from her very being, one this room had never seen. Unwilling to relent, Derek took a step closer, his tone icy, each word aimed at wounding her pride. "We don't serve people like you. This isn't a place anyone can just stroll into, wasting time and sullying the experience for genuine buyers. If you want to shop, try to use car lot down the street. There they've got someone more your speed to help you." A fresh wave of scornful laughter washed over the room. Brad fanned the flames. "That's the unwritten policy of Premier Auto Gallery." "Eric," Derek added, "let's make sure anyone who walks in knows this place is for some and not for others." In that instant, the truth of this world laid itself bare. A realm governed by prejudice, bias, and the unspoken power of gatekeepers determined to preserve their own image of purity. Their collective humiliation of Marcia wasn't personal anymore. It had become institutional. Surrounded by hostile eyes, Marcia stood firm, her breath steady even as her heart raced. She glanced at Brad, then Derek, then swept her gaze across the showroom. Something ancient and deep stirred within her. Memories of her childhood in the American South, of the contemptuous stares on crowded buses, of her grandmother's voice echoing. "They can mock you, but never let them rob you of your dignity." In that pivotal moment, Marcia understood she represented more than herself. She stood for all the mothers and children cast out merely for their background, their skin, their appearance. She spoke again, her tone still gentle but unbreakable. "Respect isn't earned by your clothes or your bank account. If Premier Auto Gallery believes otherwise, then you're the ones devaluing this place." Her words did not erase the cold stares or hushed derision, but behind the reception desk, a young associate, Kesha Davis, watched silently, tears glistening in her eyes. She would remember every detail of this injustice, and when the tide turned, she would help restore the dignity trampled in this glittering palace. Time seemed to freeze, and the mocking laughter persisted. As Marcia claimed her ground, Derek and Brad believed themselves entitled to judge a person's worth by her appearance, unaware that they had just crossed the final line of arrogance and injustice. The tension in the showroom rippled outward like freezing waves with every cutting remark and mocking laugh. What had just occurred wasn't merely the refusal of a customer. It was the public stripping away of her dignity, humiliation cheered on by a collective audience under the sparkle of crystal lights and the irony of soft jazz. Derek's and Brad's words, and those of their colleagues, hearkened back to the darkest days of racial prejudice, only now draped in the cloak of class and professionalism. That atmosphere wasn't just something Marcia felt. Everyone around her was playing a part in this discriminatory performance, each with a glance or a venomous comment. A middle-aged man in a gray suit strode by, shook his head in annoyance, then loudly declared so others could hear, "I don't know how someone like that got in here. It ruins the whole vibe." A murmur of agreement rose, and younger customers shrugged with faux pity. Who does she think she is? Think she can just waltz into a luxury showroom and drive off in a car? Behind her, a cluster of female staff snickered, eyes fixed on Marcia's scuffed shoes, then flitted to the elegant dresses of high society women, their contempt growing by the second. Every whispered jab, every snide laugh felt like an icy blade to Marcia's heart, not provoking anger in her, but a deep, chilling sorrow. It was the sorrow of someone who'd spent her life overcoming barriers, building an empire, creating jobs. only to have all that value trampled in an instant by callous stares and careless words, simply because she didn't fit their self-appointed standard. She felt as if she were suffocating beneath the showroom's brilliance. Each breath grew harder. Each sideways glance was an invisible blow to the proud heart of a mother and leader. Yet though her spirit swirled within, Marcia kept her expression composed. She knew that a single tremor, a tear or a flash of anger, would only feed their pleasure and confirm her as the dream-colored woman who doesn't know her place. At that moment, she lifted her chin and spoke quietly but firmly. "I'd like to speak with someone higher up. I believe I'm entitled to the same service as any other customer." Her request did nothing to calm the tension. If anything, it fanned the flames of Derek's arrogance. He ground out, his response deliberately loud enough for the entire showroom to hear. Each word meant to puncture her pride. "Don't you get it? I'm the highest manager here. This is my floor, and I decide who stays and who goes. If you don't cooperate, I'll call security." No sooner had he spoken than some staff laughed outright, and previously hesitant customers nodded in agreement, as if their right to exclude someone unworthy had been officially sanctioned. The air grew suffocating. Every subtle movement of Marcia's, her posture, the way she held her bag, the direction of her gaze toward the expensive cars, became a spectacle for ridicule, a living lesson in the unspoken boundaries of power and privilege. Even a passing young buyer chimed in, half mockingly, half seriously. "Maybe she just wants some Instagram shots for likes. Everyone's chasing clout these days." Marcia felt the sting of each word, each sound like tiny needles against her ear. She wondered how many women of color had been turned away from luxury spaces for not wearing the right clothes, not speaking the right way, or simply not being born into the right mold society demands. How many quietly left in silence? And how many dared to stay and say, "I deserve just as much as anyone else"? As Derek reached to call security for real, Marcia recognized the final trial was upon her. She wasn't afraid, nor would she back down. Standing before this wall of prejudice, she straightened her spine, lifted her gaze to Derek, and held it there, knowing they all awaited the scene of her removal to satisfy their curiosity and pride. At the back of the showroom, Kesha Davis, the only young black receptionist, stood silent, her hands trembling as she witnessed the ordeal. Kesha had heard stories of discrimination, but this was the first time she'd seen a woman like her own mother publicly humiliated, with no one intervening. Their eyes met briefly, a nod of solidarity and unspoken strength passing between them. Derek gave his command and hit the button to summon security, nodding toward veteran guard Tony Martinez by the entrance. "Tony, please handle this. The customer isn't cooperating and is disrupting the showroom." His order was more than a directive. It was the death nail for any hope of fair treatment. Marcia stood quietly, her heart constricting, yet clutching to her dignity, resolve, and the quiet conviction that justice would eventually speak for those courageous enough to stand firm against injustice. In that fleeting moment, surrounded by mocking eyes, Marcia realized these psychological pressures and the sense of isolation and shame were the ultimate test of her integrity as a woman, a mother, and a true leader. And she would not allow anyone, neither Derek nor the world, to steal her self-respect or her aspiration to rise for herself, for her daughter, and for everyone like her. While Derek busied himself with his phone, each tap an ostentatious display of power before the assembled crowd. Across the showroom behind the reception desk, Kesha Davis stood frozen between two worlds. The cacophony of mocking laughter and whispered cruelty swelled around her like a wave crashing in her mind. Every word Derek spoke, every cold glance Brad cast, every unfriendly stare from a customer felt like a blade cutting into Kesha's pride, reminding her all too vividly of the stories her mother, her aunt, and she herself had buried in memories about a black person's place in this world. 3 months at Premier Auto Gallery hadn't been long, but it was enough for Kesha to learn the unspoken rules. VIP clients were always white, or at least those who looked sophisticated and fitting. Everyone else, especially people of color, immigrants, or anyone dressed simply, was subject to scrutiny and indifferent service. She had often bowed her head to avoid notice, ignored when a colleague called someone a problem customer. But she had never witnessed such blatant, cold, public humiliation as she did this morning. Kesha bit her lip, her hands trembling as she clung to the edge of the desk. Every fiber of her being urged her to speak up, to protect the woman the whole showroom had turned its back on, to prove there was still compassion, still a conscience in this place. But the warning looks from her coworkers said, "Don't be foolish. Don't interfere. You're just a probationary employee. No standing here." Inside Kesha, a silent battle raged. On one side, the very real fear of losing her job, of being unable to pay rent or afford her mother's medical bills. On the other, shame and indignation at watching someone like herself be humiliated before everyone with no one to intervene. Between those lines, she locked eyes with Marcia, calm, but beneath that calm, a silent plea. Don't let justice stay silent. Kesha glanced around. Jake, the young associate she'd eaten lunch with many times, shook his head slightly, staring at the marble floor. Linda even turned her back, pretending to sort paperwork, avoiding all eye contact. A hush fell amid the jeers, as if the entire showroom awaited someone brave enough to break this cruel, unspoken rule. Then, as if drawing courage from some hidden source, Kesha stepped away from the desk. Her first step was tentative, small, but as she neared Marcia, a fire ignited within her, lifting her chin, her voice barely above a whisper. But echoing in the rare hush that descended, she said, "I'm sorry, but I don't think she's done anything wrong. She just wants to look at cars like any other customer." The showroom fell silent. Surprised eyes turned toward Kesha, some filled with outrage, some with scorn. Turned toward Kesha, some filled with outrage, some with scorn. Brad shook his head and smirked. Derek whirled around, his eyes flashing undisguised anger. "Davis, you're asking for trouble. You know how things work here. No one wants disruption, but if you want to leave with the customer, I can arrange that." Fear flooded Kesha's chest. She looked around and saw everyone turning away or lowering their gaze. No one else would stand with her. But again, Marcia's eyes met hers, offering more than reassurance, a nod of solidarity. In that moment, Kesha knew that if she didn't speak up now, she would live forever as a silent accomplice. Gathering her courage, she repeated, firmer this time, "She's a customer, and all of us, no matter who we are, deserve to be treated with respect." The silence deepened. Jake's cheeks flushed. Linda's hands shook so much she dropped her stack of papers. A few customers exchanged uneasy looks. Derek stared at Kesha, jaw set, wielding his authority like a weapon. But for the first time, a flicker of doubt crossed his eyes. He realized that once truth is spoken, it can't be fully undone. Hastily, he barked, "Thank you, Davis. Return to your station and do your job. This isn't your concern." But in Marcia's heart, a small spark of hope flared. Today she might be humiliated or even driven from the place she helped build. But she was not alone. A seed of courage had taken root in a young receptionist's heart. And sometimes that's enough to start real change. As Kesha retreated to her desk, tears still shining in her eyes, she carried a quiet pride. She knew she might pay a price in her job or financial security, but she had acted on principle, and Marcia, watching her, offered a deep, grateful smile. On the battlefield of dignity and justice, anyone bold enough to speak out deserves to be remembered. Even a probationary employee of 3 months. Marcia walked out of the showroom, her steps slow as she passed between rows of gleaming leather seats, every eye following her, cold, mocking, some even nodding in approval. Under the crystal chandeliers and the scent of expensive perfume, the whispered chatter faded behind her, but the weight of humiliation still pressed on each step. When the automatic glass doors slid shut, Marcia tilted her head back and inhaled deeply, letting the fresh, morning air of Rodeo Drive soothe her aching chest. She reached up to smooth back her hair and watched the sunlight dancing on the hood of her old Honda Civic. Beneath the thin layer of dust on the bonnet, she could still see her own reflection, a black woman in her 40s, simple and steadfast, just expelled from the very home she had built. But Marcia refused to let that shame define her. As soon as she settled into the driver's seat, her hands still trembling slightly, she pulled out her phone and opened the company's internal messaging app. Her heart pounded, not with pain, but with a surge of purpose she hadn't felt since the early days of building her business, when every challenge was a call to action. She composed a message to her loyal executive assistant, Jessica White. "Call an emergency board meeting in 1 hour. I want all key members and general counsel present. It's extremely urgent. Premier Auto Gallery is involved." Almost instantly, confirmation notices poured in. The board members, General Counsel Margaret Lee, Chairman Robert Johnson, and all regional directors pledged their attendance, several even asking, "What happened?" Marcia replied simply, "You'll understand once you see for yourselves." As the Honda's engine roared to life, Marcia glanced in her rearview mirror at the Premier Auto Gallery sign. For a moment, she saw Kesha Davis framed by the showroom door, eyes red, hands gripping the reception desk. A quiet solidarity stirred in Marcia's heart. She was not entirely alone. That knowledge steeled her resolve to ensure this morning's events would not be forgotten as a personal defeat. Driving through the bustle of Los Angeles streets, a clear and forceful plan began to take shape in her mind. Marcia knew that if she simply slipped away, protecting her own pride while burying her humiliation, Derek Brad and the entire toxic privilege system would keep doing exactly what they'd done today. They would continue treating her and anyone else who didn't fit their narrow mold as unwelcome, turning every showroom in her chain into a fortress of prejudice. She couldn't let her legacy be distorted that way. Back in the showroom, Derek and Brad were still savoring their victory. Brad took a sip of champagne, grinning at Derek. "Nice work, my friend. No loose ends. Nobody gets past this gatekeeper." Derek laughed and clapped Brad on the shoulder. "That's all it takes. If anyone could just wander in, who'd pay real money for luxury cars? They're Sneering laughter blended with the smooth jazz and warm lighting, creating a scene utterly at odds with the respect and dignity Marcia had worked to cultivate. What they didn't realize was that the woman they'd humiliated, mocked, and driven from the showroom, the one they'd turned into a lesson for anyone who didn't know their place, held the true power over Premier Auto Gallery's fate. Every gesture and word from today had been recorded, not just in Marcia's memory, but in the minds of people like Kesha, and soon on the agenda of that emergency board meeting. On her drive home, Marcia received an unexpected call from her daughter Jasmine. "Mom, where did you go today? Can we celebrate tonight?" Hearing her daughter's bright voice, Marcia felt her heart soften. She smiled and replied confidently, "Tonight I'll have a very special story to tell you, Jasmine, and I promise things will be better after today." She hung up and looked forward at the sunlit streets. California sunshine gleamed around her, but inside a storm of determination and justice was already brewing. Marcia knew she wasn't just preparing for a meeting. She was gearing up for a seismic shift that would forever change how people in her world understood dignity, equality, and true fairness. And while Derek and Brad still reveled in their morning achievement, a flurry of texts, emails, driver orders, and urgent calls were racing through corporate channels, preparing the comeback they never saw coming. The showroom buzz at Premier Auto Gallery showed no signs of dying down. New clients filtered in while staff continued to whisper about this morning's incident, some even trading it as a gleeful anecdote. Derek poured himself an espresso, patting himself on the back as the self-appointed gatekeeper of the dealership's exclusivity, and Brad jostled in close, bragging about their exemplary handling of anyone who didn't know their place. Just then, amid their complacent chatter, low honks rolled up from outside the glass doors. A procession of dark Cadillac Escalades and two sleek black Mercedes Maybachs glided to a precise stop at the entrance, drawing every eye in the showroom. All at once, their doors opened and figures stepped out, each radiating the aura of true elite power and professional prestige. Marcia Williams emerged first. Gone were the faded polo and scuffed sneakers. She wore a perfectly tailored slate gray suit, standing tall with a steely gaze and the calm authority of someone responsible for thousands of livelihoods. A delicate strand of pearls encircled her neck, and her glossy black heels clicked confidently and firmly on the marble floor. Elegant, commanding, impossible to ignore. Behind her came Margaret Lee, general counsel, solemn and dossier in hand. Robert Johnson, board chairman, tall with silver hair and razor-sharp eyes, followed by other executives, legal aides, and two black-suited attorneys carrying leather briefcases. They advanced as though the showroom were their own boardroom. No permission needed, no regard for the astonished stares of staff or customers. In that moment, everything froze. Jake, the junior associate who'd mocked Marcia that morning, stood open-mouthed. Papers dropping from his hands as he dared not bend to gather them. Linda, sorting files, whirled around, pale as she recognized Margaret Lee. Even the dealership's regulars paused, whispering Robert Johnson's name with newfound respect. Brad hadn't yet processed what was happening when Derek felt a chill run down his spine. He looked up and met Marcia's steely stare. For an instant, he remembered the humble woman who'd been expelled earlier, but he shook it off as a trick of the light. That is, until Marcia's voice rang out across what had been Derek's own fortress. "Good afternoon, everyone. I trust today will be one none of you ever forget." She stopped in the center of the showroom, her eyes sweeping over the stunned faces, lingering on those who'd sneered at her, Derek and Brad included. The hush was so complete you could hear a pin drop on the marble. Derek forced a friendly smile and stepped forward. "Welcome. I'm not sure if you have appointments today. We have many clients. If you need assistance—" Marcia raised a hand, cutting him off. "You're Derek Morrison, correct? And you're Brad Chen. I won't take much of your time. I am Marcia Williams, CEO and majority shareholder of Williams Automotive Group, the legal owner of Premier Auto Gallery and 47 dealerships nationwide. This morning I came here as an ordinary customer to assess the real experience. What I received is something I believe the entire board should see firsthand." The room exploded. Linda lowered her head in shame. Jake scooted behind the desk. A seasoned clientele stepped aside, eyes filled with respect. Brad turned pale, lips pressed tight. Only Derek stood frozen, words failing him. Margaret Lee stepped forward, opening her thick dossier and flipping through prepared pages before speaking clearly. "As General Counsel, I hereby announce that based on reports and evidence from staff, customers, and this morning's security footage, Williams Automotive Group is convening an emergency full board meeting. We will take strict action against any individuals found to have violated our diversity, equity, and customer respect policies, and we will launch a comprehensive review of the work environment at Premier Auto Gallery." Her words hit like thunder. Brad sank onto a chair, sweat beading on his forehead. Derek stammered. "This is just a misunderstanding. I was following showroom protection protocol." Marcia's gaze hardened. "The protocol of a billion-dollar company is never discrimination, humiliation, or expelling customers because they displease a floor manager. Our protocol is to create value, to respect every customer, regardless of who they are, what they wear, what car they drive, or the color of their skin." For the first time, everyone in the showroom, even those who had mocked and scorned her, felt their own insignificance in the face of Marcia's authority, intelligence, and integrity. Shock and shame rippled through the crowd, while outside the glass doors, California sunshine shone brighter than ever. Marcia Williams's sharp words still echoed through the luxurious showroom. Once hailed as the fortress of exclusivity and refinement. Silence fell, every eye fixed on the woman standing in its center like a true leader. Each person, from customers to staff, from those complicit in prejudice to those too timid to speak, waited for her verdict.